I smell a roast.
Does it smell like a turkey?
We're roasting a turkey.
No turkeys. But yeah, so on the roast this week, I wanted to roast Thanksgiving because like we do with a lot of the holidays around here, we like to not only roast them, but also kind of dive into them a little bit more because there's so much that I don't know about stuff like that. Like we all know the romanticized version of the holiday, the one we learned in elementary school, you know, like colonial settlers broke bread and had corn and had maize and cornucopias with the Native Americans to celebrate the harvest. And then it kind of became a national holiday with a big parade in New York City, right? Like that's like basically what, you know, we do the hand turkey and put that on a wall. And yeah. Like that's the elementary school thing. So I did some digging, and I learned a lot about this holiday I had no idea about.
I can't wait to hear about it.
All
Jeff.
right. First, the first Thanksgiving, the actual first Thanksgiving in America, did not take place in 1621 in Plymouth. It took place in Texas.
Oh, that's
weird, right?
Yeah.
In 1541, this dude, Francisco Vasquez de Coronado, everybody had freaking great names back then, and his expedition held a Thanksgiving celebration in Palo Duro Canyon in the Texas Panhandle.
Huh.
And it was literally a feast between the natives and his troops, and they broke bread, and it was like giving thanks.
Were they fighting before that, or how's that work?
Yeah, everybody was fighting. You know, I mean, like the Native Americans, whether it's Central or North or South or whatever, were fighting the people who were coming across on boats and being like, I think we're going to live here now.
Imagine how
I don't think so.
Imagine how interesting that must have been to like, okay, guys, let's relax for a second. Nobody's gonna lose out if we just sit down and have a fucking meal together.
Right.
But it must have been just so intense, just sitting there across the table, like, all right, guys, don't start cliques. Let's all mix it up. Let's go native, us, native, and okay, and
boy girl.
Yeah.
Well, so I didn't know that at all. But then, honestly, what the holiday really stems from is that initial feast in Plymouth in 1621. But nearly all of what historians have learned about that first Thanksgiving in New England comes from a single eyewitness report, a letter written in December of that year by Edward Winslow. He was one of the 100 or so people who sailed from England aboard the Mayflower in 1620 and founded Plymouth Colony in Massachusetts. Then after that, William Bradford, Plymouth's governor in 1621, wrote briefly of the event on the Plymouth plantation, his history of the colony, and more, but that was more than 20 years after the feast itself that he wrote this.
Oh, weird. So
he wrote that in 1640.
And who knows if his recollection was even
right.
Close.
And this initial feast did not take place on the fourth Thursday of November like it does in the national observance that we have it today. It actually would have taken place 3 days in between late September and mid-November of 1621 because it was considered a harvest celebration. Mm-hmm. The colonial people that came over on the Mayflower that entire year had been working with the Wampanoag Indian tribe. Squanto was a part of that. He could speak English at this point.
Ew.
So he was like the person who was like the liaison, and both groups were helping each other with their harvest. So at the end of the harvest, this whole Indian tribe would have been around this area, so it would have been just kind of in the same vicinity. Hey, we're in the neighborhood. Let's all have a dinner kind of thing.
Right.
Is how that would have happened. But just over 50 colonists would have attended this dinner. That was because they were also celebrating surviving their first year in New England. Over 3/4 of the people who came over in that initial thing died, and 78% of those people were women.
Whoa.
At the original feast, there was only, by the record of this one eyewitness, there was only 4 housewives, married housewives, that attended this feast. So again, that romanticized version of all the women cooking the food and the men, you know, the Indians and the men were, you know, shaking hands and stuff like that. No, pretty much everybody cooked the food because it was about 150 people. The chief, his name was Massasoit, the great king of the Wampanoag, brought over 90 Native Americans to this, and there was less than 50 colonists.
Whoa.
So, it was a big dinner, and I'm sure everybody pitched the hell in to feed everybody. It wasn't just like, let's leave it to these poor 4 women to do this. I had no idea about that. But times were tough back then.
Yeah.
For sure.
Crazy. Could you imagine coming over and trying to settle and then losing almost everybody, thinking that you might be the next one?
Right.
And then you actually get to the end of the harvest and you're like, oh my God, we're going to fucking make it.
Again, by that one account, it was counted that there was almost 20 children and teenagers at this as well. And that is a huge, huge thing for history because those kids went on to continue to populate these colonies. You know what I mean? I mean, think about how hard it was for a woman or a man to make it through that winter. A child, it's even worse.
Yeah.
Because you're much more susceptible to diseases.
Imagine how hardy they were.
Yeah.
They probably came out made of leather.
Yeah, for sure.
Jesus.
And then after, so I learned about all that kind of stuff, which really puts a damper on the traditional Norman Rockwell painting of Thanksgiving.
Nobody likes that shit anyways. We want to hear the real story, right? The people dying, the only 4 women.
Craziness.
That's the shit we really want to hear.
So here's some other random facts I found out that I just thought was absolutely crazy.
Oh, they're breaking. I thought they were touching little spoons together. I was like, that doesn't make sense.
It's the wishbone there. The holiday didn't gain prominence actually until the 19th century. It was actually posed to President Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, when he was president, and he went on record saying that was the most ridiculous thing he's ever heard was to make Thanksgiving a national holiday.
Why?
I don't know. He just thought it was silly. Whereas President Washington, when George Washington was president, actually encouraged Americans to celebrate the idea of Thanksgiving, but wasn't pushing for it to be a national holiday. It wasn't until the 19th century when a magazine editor, by the name of Sarah Josephia Hale, pleaded with President Abraham Lincoln to make it a national holiday, not only to celebrate Thanksgiving, but to use it as a way to ease the tensions from the Civil War.
Yeah.
And Lincoln thought it was a great idea, so he did. Another fun fact about Sarah Hale there, she wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All 3 notes.
Yeah, all 3 notes. The food at that initial feast, which were always, like I said, the cornucopias and, pots of potatoes and turkey and stuff like that.
What is a cornucopia, Jeff? What is it, a gourd?
No, it's like a thing of hay, I think.
Oh, you
that
make
you stuff
it?
with stuff. Yeah, you make it.
Oh, so it's like a bowl made of straw?
Yeah, I think.
Wow.
So the traditional feast that we know today, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, that makes
sense. I'm not
sense.
saying that there might not have been turkeys because turkeys were in the forest, but it probably might have been a turkey for those 150
probably
people.
like deer.
Fish. Shellfish and fish were the prominent proteins because they were a fishing town.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so that's what they were eating, 100%.
Weird.
A lot of corn because that's what they were harvesting.
Maize.
Leeks, cucumbers, onions. There was a lot of that going on.
They must have had
there.
potatoes going on.
No potatoes. Potatoes weren't grown in
What? This is a roast officially.
Potatoes weren't grown in the area until years later. So they were working on that crop. That crop hadn't been integrated yet. So I'm sorry, but I know it's ruining your whole idea. My favorite part of Thanksgiving dinner is the potatoes.
I love sweet potatoes, by the way. Those candied yams. Oh, get in my fucking face. They're so good.
Mm-hmm.
They're so good.
Mm-hmm. So that's pretty interesting. Another thing about that original feast, and then one of the staples of
they had green bean casserole though, right?
Of course they did. Yeah, of course they did. Put it in those little, trays.
With the little onion straws?
Yeah, of
definitely.
Course. Another thing that's a staple in American tradition of Thanksgiving is cranberries or cranberry sauce. More than likely, that was not in the initial feast either. It was, if anything, would have been used as a garnish.
Wow.
Because cranberries were used completely differently back then. The Native Americans also taught the colonists to do this as well.
Throw them away because they're garbage.
No, they used them to treat wounds.
Oh,
and they also used them to dye their arrows and dye their clothing.
Oh, weird.
So they actually utilized cranberries completely different than to actually, cook and eat them.
Yeah, because they taste like garbage. It makes sense. I mean, you ever have like organic cranberry juice like on it, and you drink it and you're like, oh, that's bad, and then it washes away and you're like, did I just vomit? It's terrible.
It's terrible.
And honestly, the only thing good out of cranberries is that fake cranberry out of a can saw shit that you slice up into little discs.
Yeah, well, that's because it's filled with sugar, and that's.
It's not. It's like 1% cranberries.
Yeah,
because cranberries taste disgusting. You get the real stuff, and you're like, oh boy, this looks good.
You just roasted cranberries.
That's what I'm doing, Jeff. Get out of my way. I'm sorry. Go on. I'm gonna get off.
No. I got a couple other fun facts that I had no idea. The first ever, we love this on this show, space. The first ever meal that was eaten on the moon by Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong was a turkey dinner.
Oh.
Obviously freeze-dried turkey with all the fixings, but still, that's what they requested in their menu, and they had that. They literally ate that on the moon. So first food to ever. So turkeys can't fly, but they've been to the moon. Crazy. Here's one last thing before I get into the final part of this roast. I thought this was crazy. So in 1953, Swanson, which you probably have heard of this company, they overestimated the number of frozen turkeys that they thought they would sell on Thanksgiving by 26 tons.
Yeah, that's time to liquidate. I know that as an inventory manager. That's non-moving inventory, and it's also perishable.
Right.
So they probably had to do some sort of mega deal.
Nope. They cut them up, repackaged them, repurposed them, and now, today, we can thank them for creating the TV dinner.
No way.
That's the first TV dinners were turkey, and still to this day, you can get a Swanson turkey TV dinner.
It's probably still from the 26 tons.
Oh,
it tastes like it.
Finally, one of the biggest things that has happened since the inception of the holiday is the Macy's Day Parade. I love watching the parade every year and making fun of all the cold people on the sidelines and all the crazy Broadway plays and shows and the horrible
Does that mad
singers.
old dude still do it?
Mad old dude.
You know, the two announcer people.
Oh, yeah, all of them are still doing it.
One of them's like
except for Matt Lauer.
Why?
He got me too'd.
Yeah.
But
we don't want him around.
Macy's Day Parade every year in New York City, watched by over 50 million people worldwide. Another thing I always laugh at is they always get like pop stars or country stars to sing on the floats.
Yeah.
But it's obviously pre-recorded and pre-taped, but they never give them good enough in-ears, so they're never synced up right. Those poor bastards, they're trying so hard, but
that's beautiful.
It's just the worst. The best is when they have like Sesame Street come out and sing, because it's just puppets, and they look the best. They kill it. Go Sesame Street. But here's a fun fact about the parade, and I'll end on this. I thought it was interesting. It began in 1924, and for the first 3 years of the parade, it was actual live animals: tigers, goats, bears, elephants.
Tell me
zebras.
It went wrong.
It didn't necessarily go wrong, but after 3 years,
I don't believe it. A tiger fucking got loose.
After 3 years of having to clean up all the shit and everything from all these animals and have to deal with all these animals and like literal tigers like roaring at children and all that crap, they were like, you know what? Let's try balloons. And ever since then, it's been balloons.
I don't believe it. I'm sure something got loose and made people Thanksgiving.
The balloon that's been there the longest. Do you know the balloon that's been there the longest?
No, I don't know anything about the
Snoopy.
Macy's Day Parade.
Snoopy has been in more parades than any other balloon. Thanks to Charles Schultz and the Peanuts gang there.
I bet it stinks.
They update them all. They update them all the time. But the balloons have grown and grown and grown to the point now where some of them require over 100 people to walk them down, and they all have pilots. They all have pilots that pilot them as well. It's crazy. It's a crazy endeavor.
I think I know my calling, Jeff.
Oh man. So a happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I hope you had some fun going down the roast, because I learned a lot about this holiday I had no idea about.
I'm gonna forget it all tomorrow.
Yeah, because you know why? Because we're all gonna be in a food coma.